Welcome everybody to the Lake Norman Chamber of Commerce Focus Friday. I'm Bill Russell, President of the Chamber of Commerce, and we've got an exciting program as we focus on transportation. But today what we want to do before we lead off is to hear from Jennifer Husky. Jennifer is with Novant Health, and she's going to talk about what's going on from a healthcare perspective, particularly COVID numbers. And Jennifer, we got more people being vaccinated. We got 3 vaccines on the market. Positives are coming down. Hopefully we can get back to business. Please give me some good news.
I have great news for you today. I'm actually going to read some numbers right off my notepad here. These are numbers as of yesterday for Novant Health. We have now discharged over 12,000 patients that came to our hospital facility with COVID. That is 91% of the patients that came positive or ended up positive have now been discharged and gone home. We have now given 523,254 unique tests. So that takes out if folks were multiple tested folks, patients, staff members. So each of those is a unique number. As of yesterday, in all Novant Health facilities, which of course covers our facilities here in the Charlotte area, the Winston-Salem area. If you haven't heard, we now have a new partnership in New Hanover, and of course our beach numbers there in Brunswick. In all of our facilities, we only have 95 patients. At our highest, back the second week in January, just Huntersville Medical Center at 139 beds, we had 58 COVID patients, and our entire ICU was full of COVID and ventilator patients. So all good things. To date, we have given 183,000 vaccine shots, at least one of them, and we have 25 plus shots still scheduled to come up in the next couple of weeks. I want to dispel a rumor. There's quite a rumor out there that the shot affects fertility. And so there's a lot of women in childbearing ages that are avoiding the vaccine out of a sheer rumor, not science. So we would like to encourage from the Novant Health perspective, the physician practices, the acute facilities, that there is zero evidence, it's just a rumor about fertility. We're now in phase 2 for vaccines on children, and we'll have more information by probably next meeting, if not the meeting after, for information on that. I think that's probably all about vaccines. And the other thing I want to talk about is super exciting for Huntersville Medical Center. We go live, this is a delayed live, as everything else was, a delayed live but it's this March 29th with our STEMI program. If you're not familiar with that, if you or a loved one or a friend was in the midst of having a heart attack or had a heart attack and were being taken by ambulance, you had to go downtown. We now, as of March 29th, will have everything you need at Huntersville Medical Center. And as you probably know, time is of the literal essence when it comes to a heart attack patient. So the closer you can get your care in an acute facility, the better your results and your outcomes will be. So comprehensive heart and vascular will now be available at Huntersville Medical Center. Very big deal for the Lake Norman area.
Well, Jennifer,
that's all.
We appreciate Novant being our presenting sponsor of Focus Fridays and has been for quite some time. We also want to thank Business Today, Cornelius Today, and WSIC for also being supporting sponsors of our Focus Friday events. I want to welcome Jeff Tart, our Public Policy Chair. And Jeff, you've had some great programs. And what's the next program? I know that's lined up as well.
The next program is with Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, Dr. Mandy Cohen. She's going to be giving us an update from her perspective on the status of the vaccine work statewide. Will be almost the exclusive topic of focus with her next month.
Well, I'm excited about this. I know we've got Mike Miltich. I've known Mike for quite some time as Commissioner, Mayor Pro Tem of Cornelius, now Chair of the CRTPO. You want to go ahead and introduce Mike, and Mike, I think you're going to introduce your team.
I'll be happy to, and you almost completed it. But a couple things, quick notes, picking up on Jennifer's comment about concerns about fertility and taking the vaccine as that next step, because there's concerns about people being pregnant. I'll just give you one tidbit. My niece, who's a board certified OB-GYN and pregnant with their third child, just had her COVID vaccination. So that's a pretty good testament when the physicians that are pregnant are also getting vaccinated. Also, as a little bit of a public service announcement, tomorrow there will be a mass vaccination event like we've been seeing at different places. This one tomorrow, Saturday, will be at the Kannapolis Baseball Stadium. So if you're interested and want to get vaccinated, I would look to sign up. If you're not quite in the qualifications, sign up to, or at least get on the wait list, if you will, at the end of the day, because if lots are open, they will use them rather than lose them or waste them. So they expect over 15,000 people. I'll be working there tomorrow. So if you see me, say hello. As far as today's event, today is topical and germane to what we do every day, which is our transportation infrastructure and our roads and stuff and how we get around. And as we all know, congestion's been a big issue, and knowing about road priorities and stuff. Today, we have the pleasure of having Dr. Mike Miltich here with us today. Mike, as a lot of us know, and used his services forever before he retired, was an otolaryngologist, Mayo Clinic trained. So he's a very bright, smart guy. So that's why they put him on transportation to solve all these congestion. The fact that he's been in the community so long, active with Boy Scouts, active in the various political parties, very active with our town and our community, serving on the town board, and then taking on probably one of the prime responsibilities beyond the monthly duties that we look at with commissioners and the mayor serving is the CRTPO role, which is the body that helps establish priorities and gives direction to NCDOT and to the governor. So these guys have a direct line to Raleigh and helping influence priorities. Today, we're going to ask Mike to facilitate a panel discussion with his colleagues who he works with on a virtually daily basis, monthly basis within CRTPO. We have a fantastic panel of people who are experts in this area, and I'm going to ask Mike to go ahead and take control. And if you'll introduce the panelists today, that you guys will lead a discussion and share with us what's going on in transportation in the Lake Norman region.
Thanks, Jeff, and congratulations on saying otolaryngology properly. I wanted to talk, well, Jeff asked me to talk about transportation as it impacts our region. So I've asked the transportation professionals of our 4 towns. I have Dave Hill, who's our Huntersville Senior Planner in charge of transportation, Aaron Tucker, our Cornelius Planning Director, Andrew Ventresca, Davidson Senior Planner, and he's also, importantly, the CRTPO TCC Chair, which we'll explain a little bit later, Cami Weckerly, the Mooresville Transportation Engineer, and over all of us is Neil Burke, the CRTPO Program Manager, whose footprint is the tri-counties, Iredell, Mecklenburg, and urbanized area of Union County. Also joining us are Erika Martin, who's from the Mooresville Transportation Planner, and I haven't seen Jonathan Young show up yet. So anyway, so I'm going to have the panelists tell us a little bit about themselves and explain their role in transportation planning and delivery, and we'll start at Huntersville and head up the road. So Dave?
Thank you, sir. Good morning. I'm glad everybody is bright-eyed and bushy-tailed for a Friday morning meeting. My name is Dave Hill. I've only been working for the town of Huntersville for 2 years. But I have been in long-range planning and involved in transportation planning for about 30 years. One of my primary interests throughout my career has been trying to move from the regulatory into the how to get it done kind of mode. And in terms of putting together development agreements, trying to use infrastructure improvements as incentives for economic development, looking to ways to improve access and marketability of important sites or sites that are pegged for employment. These are all the types of projects that I've worked on in the past. So watching Huntersville grow and knowing how much available land they still have, which is fairly considerable, it'll be interesting to watch how growth impacts the North Mac area and what the business environment will be as we move forward.
Thank you, Dave. Mr. Tucker?
Good morning, everyone, and happy Friday. I'm Aaron Tucker, the planning director here with Cornelius, and I've been in this position for a little bit over a year now, but really been with the town over 3 years, and actually started my career here back in 2014 as an intern. So have a lot of history, probably not as much experience as some others in the transportation realm, but certainly over the past 3 years have learned a lot and what's important to our citizens. And if there's anything that we hear a lot about, and that's traffic, congestion, and transportation. So I do think these talks are great, and it's good to get the word out.
Thank you, Andrew. Mr. Ventresca?
Good morning. I'm Andrew Ventruska, senior planner with the town of Davidson. I've been with the town for about a year, and as all you can guess, it's mostly been from home, which has been an interesting year. It's been one of the most interesting years of my life, I'll say. My role is basically to facilitate all things transportation planning related in town, which includes coordination and interaction with citizens, town departments, elected officials, and other municipalities. Town-related duties I perform include review of transportation impact analysis for development projects, implementation of adopted transportation plans, and seeking funding opportunities for town projects. A major role of my job is being part of the CRTPO Technical Coordinating Committee. I currently sit on numerous committees for CRTPO, such as the UPWP Committee, the Bike Ped Work Group, the 2050 MTP Advisory Committee and Roadway Ranking Committee, and the Strategic Plan Steering Committee. As Dr. Mike mentioned, in January, I was elected as Vice Chair of the TCC. As Vice Chair, my main role is to chair the Project Oversight Committee, which is charged with overseeing the distribution of any discretionary funding, either state or federal, that comes to the CRTPO. Outside of work, I am an avid bicyclist, and I have enjoyed riding through the Lake Norman region, particularly since the pandemic started. Neil Burke and I have gotten out and ridden a lot of the area. I do appreciate being here this morning, and it's a pleasure to be here in front of you all.
Thank you, Andrew. Ms. Weckerly?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Cami Weckerly. I'm the transportation engineer for the town of Mooresville. I have been in this position for it's over 4 years now. I actually moved from out of state. I was previously in Arizona. And so I think the benefit of that is just the opportunity to see other transportation systems and see what else is out there and be a little more diverse in my experience using those facilities. But coming to North Carolina, the role of transportation engineer was a little bit wider. It included transportation planning, which I did not have much previous experience with, but the benefit of being part of CRTPO was just the group of professionals and how organized everyone is and the prioritization process. So took some learning, but the process works, and everyone was very helpful in that process. So thankfully, a couple years after I started, we did hire on a transportation planner who's also on the call today, Erika Martin. And together we really work hard to identify new roadways, new connections, ways for people to travel locally and not have to utilize the major routes as much. But I'll speak a little bit more about that later. Don't want to get into it at this point, but it's nice to meet everyone, and I'm happy to be here this morning.
And finally, we have Neil Burke, our CTPO program manager. And Neil, besides, after you introduce yourself and talk about what you do, go ahead and go into your first question, which is, from myself, I have been told it takes 20 years for a transportation concept to become a reality. Please tell the audience about the 2050 NTP that is currently underway by CRTPO. How are projects submitted? How is financing estimated? Is economic development a project ranking criteria? So I'll go ahead, introduce yourself and go straight into your topic.
Great, thank you, Dr. Mike. I'm just going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. All right, let's see. So a little bit about me. I'm a Huntersville resident. So normally if we were meeting in person, I would thank you all for allowing me to sleep in and not have to brave the traffic on the way into Charlotte, but that's not really an appropriate joke given the last year with all of us working from home. But I've been active in the transportation planning industry here in Charlotte for the last 15 years. The first 3 years I was working in the consulting industry doing transportation plans, traffic studies throughout the Charlotte region. I served as a transportation planner in the town of Mooresville. It's a position Erika Martin currently has. I was there from 2009 through 2013 and did a lot of initiatives within the town, but also was active in planning projects throughout the region. And then the last 7 years, I've been working with the CRTPO. The last 2 years, I've served as a program manager and secretary to the CRTPO board, for which Dr. Mike is a chair. So again, pleasure to be with you all this morning. I just want to start before I answer Dr. Mike's question and just make sure everyone's aware of what the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization is. So CRTPO, we're the federally designated metropolitan planning organization for the Charlotte urbanized area. So our planning area consists of Iredell, Mecklenburg, and a portion of Union County, basically the urbanized portion. So we're 21 cities and towns, 3 counties. We also include the North Carolina Board of Transportation. We have 2 NCDOT divisions within our planning area. Division 10, Mecklenburg and Union County, and then Division 12 is Iredell. And then we also have the Metropolitan Transit Commission as a board member. So CRTPO is responsible for allocating federal funding to projects and programs within the Charlotte urbanized area. I'd like to show this slide because it really shows the evolution of the MPO. You know, it all began in 1965. This organization really was just focused on the city of Charlotte, as you can see that donut area in the center there. And we became a larger organization throughout the 70s and 80s as the Charlotte area began to grow. In 1990, we began moving into the Union County area. And then in 2010, we made our way into Iredell County. And this growth of the MPO is attributed to the urbanized areas within the US Census. So as the Charlotte urbanized area continues to grow, we took on more planning areas. So our current population within our planning area, the 3-county area, is about 1.4 million people. So we're the largest MPO in North Carolina, and North Carolina has 18 MPOs. So to get into Dr. Mike's question, I am primarily here to talk about the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, for which we're developing or updating. But that's really one of the 3 pillars of our planning process at CRTPO. And many of you have probably seen this graphic before, but it's very important because it's kind of the fundamentals of CRTPO. We have these 3 plans and programs, first of which is the Comprehensive Transportation Plan. It's our plan where we really envision what the transportation network looks like over the next 50 years, not just highways, but bicycle and pedestrian facilities, transit and rail. This is a state required plan. There's no financial element to it. It's really kind of a needs assessment. What does our system need to be given growth and development throughout our area? And then we move into the MTP, which I'll talk a little more about in the next couple of slides. And this is a federally required plan. We have to update the Metropolitan Transportation Plan every 4 years. That's a federal highway administration requirement. So this plan update, we need to have it adopted by our board in March of 2022. And really the focus of the MTP is to prioritize those needs coming out of the comprehensive transportation plan. So we take a look at those projects identified in the comprehensive transportation plan, we prioritize them, and then there's a fiscal constraint element where we anticipate what our budget will be to fund projects throughout the next 20 plus years, and we prioritize it based upon that budget. And then moving into the Transportation Improvement Program, this is another federally required plan, and we work with NCDOT to develop this. This is really a planning document that lists the next 10 years worth of projects, and it allocates funding to those projects. So the CRTPO board must adopt a transportation improvement program every 2 years, and it has to be the same as the state transportation improvement program that the North Carolina Board of Transportation adopts. So the project schedules, the projects themselves, and the funding must be the same between CRTPO's TIP and the state's STIP. So getting into the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan process, there's really several elements to it. It's the first of which is to look at the goals and objectives. That's something we began doing last fall. And then developing the roadway and non-roadway revenue assumptions. Again, this gets back to how much funding do you think that the CRTPO area will have throughout the next 20 years for roadway projects, transit, bicycle and pedestrian facilities, a call for roadway candidate projects. This is something that we offer to our member jurisdictions, the ability to tell us which projects they want to see evaluated in this process. And then the project prioritization process, that's something we're currently doing now. And then there's the review and adoption. So all of this takes place over a 1.5 year, 2 year time frame. So it's a pretty intensive process, but there are many opportunities for our communities throughout our region to be involved in these different efforts. As I mentioned, we began the kickoff of our plan in the summer of 2020. We convened an advisory committee for which Erika Martin and Andrew Ventresca were involved to really review and update the goals and objectives, look at the roadway ranking criteria. And here we are in 2021. This is really where a lot of the major milestones for the 2050 MTP are upon us in terms of getting the goals and objectives adopted, getting the roadway ranking criteria adopted by the board, starting the roadway ranking process, developing cost estimates for over 240 projects that we received, and then culminating with the development of the draft fiscally constrained project list, and then writing the report, doing air quality conformity, and just preparing for the final plan adoption in March of 2022. So as you can see, it'll be very tough for me to find any vacation time this year. Moving into a little more detail about some of the ongoing activities. As I mentioned, the goals and objectives were approved by the CRTPO board last month. You can find those on our project website, that's 2050mtp.org. The roadway project ranking methodology was also approved in February of 2021. We are beginning the process of using that to score and prioritize the projects that we received from the communities throughout our planning area. The candidate project submittal, as I mentioned, we opened a candidate project submittal for the 24 cities and towns and counties throughout our planning area in late January. We closed that in February. We've finalized the project details and project lists, the financial plan assumptions. Those were actually approved by the CRTPO board at the meeting on Wednesday. And we're working on developing those financial plan assumptions for the non-roadway projects now. Again, the bike ped and transit projects throughout the planning area. Project evaluation, we had our first roadway ranking committee meeting on Wednesday. And that committee will meet 6 more times, again, to evaluate these projects, develop project scores, and then develop that fiscally constrained project list that will be coming to the CRTPO board in May. And then we'll have another comment period, which I'll talk about here in a minute. So this is an important part of the plan. How do we develop our financial projections? What we do, it's a 2-part process. We look at the amount of funding for projects in our area within the current transportation improvement program. So the years for that current program are 2020 through 2032. And then, this is a plan out to 2050. So we have to make some assumptions. We have to develop revenue projections for those years outside of the TIP. So from 2033 through 2050. We used a 2% annual escalation rate to get us the funding throughout the life of the plan from 2020 through 2050. So that those two processes give us our total available anticipated revenue throughout the life of the plan. So what we found is that there's roughly $9 billion for funds for projects throughout the CRTPO planning area from 2020 through 2050. And before you get excited about that amount, there are several caveats to that. So 3.8 billion of that are projects that are already spoken for, projects that are programmed into our transportation improvement program. And then there are projects that are kind of partially funded. There's a little bit of funding in the current STIP, but then there's funding that's beyond that 13-year window. So $1.8 billion of that $9 billion is already kind of spoken for these active projects, but it's not in the current window. So that leaves about $3.4 billion for allocation to roadway projects throughout the life of the MTP. And then we have to kind of apply a reduction factor into today's current dollars. So we really only have about $2.2 billion to fund roadway projects. Again, seems like a huge amount of funding, but as you all know, construction costs are increasing. This area is still growing rapidly. We're getting something like 50 to 100 residents moving here from other places every day. So one of the themes for this particular MTP update is starting to look at alternative revenue sources. We realized that the gas tax in North Carolina was sustainable years ago, but cars continue to get more fuel efficient. Electric vehicles are an emerging technology. There's connected and autonomous vehicles. So as part of this, we are kind of exploring some different recommendations to generate additional revenue in this area. And that's not a new concept. The NC First Commission, that's a statewide initiative. They're looking at the same thing. The Charlotte Moves Task Force, Connect Beyond, and the Charlotte Moves Task Force, they've all recognized that the traditional means of funding these large capital projects is just not sustainable for the amount of growth we have and the amount of infrastructure improvements that are currently needed. So we'll definitely be looking into that and developing recommendations as to how we can move forward and generate additional revenue for projects. So moving into the candidate roadway projects summary. Again, we opened a call for roadway projects to our member jurisdictions, and the TCC members or the staff members involved with transportation in each of our communities were able to submit projects from the comprehensive transportation plan or the previously scored in the MTP. So as you can see on the left-hand side, we had 240 roadway project submittals. We have a breakdown of what we received in each of our 3 counties. And then on the right-hand side, you can kind of see that the donut chart that shows the types of projects. Not a surprise, the most common project is roadway widenings. As you know, in North Mech and throughout the region, we're still dealing with some very outdated roads, mostly farm to market roads, secondary roads that are carrying a significant amount of traffic. So they need to be widened and capacity added. 48 projects were new location projects or extensions of existing roadways, basically bolstering the network, providing alternative connections. There were 13 improvements to existing interchanges, and then there were 2 new interchange projects, one of which was the Westmoreland Road and I-77 grade separation interchange conversion here in Cornelius, and then the other one was I-77 and Jane Sowers Road in Statesville. And again, these are all in the process of being evaluated and scored. And then you can kind of see spatially here on a map where all these projects are. You can see the widening and new location projects and the interchange projects in the map on the right-hand side. Just want to talk a little bit about how we rank these roadway projects. And I apologize, the slide says 2045 MTP, should say 2050, but our roadway methodology hasn't changed that much. We did add a new criteria for tier 2, and that's equitable access, basically making sure that we can provide economic development opportunities to all communities throughout our planning area. But anyway, the intent of the methodology is to evaluate these 240 projects quantitatively with a significant amount of automation. So the tier 1 criteria, you can see it aligns pretty well with the state's criteria. 100 points possible for congestion, points for reducing safety issues, and also points for accessibility to employment. And that gets into the whole economic development benefit. Improving these roadways, providing easier access for people to get to these different employment centers. The tier 2 criteria, this is really where the roadway ranking committee comes into play. Erika and Andrew are active on that committee. We're going to be asking that committee to help us rank the tier 2 criteria, or the environmental justice impacts, equitable access, natural resources, historic resources, system connectivity, and benefit cost ratio. So this 2-tiered process allows us to look both quantitatively and qualitatively at these projects and really determine a comprehensive benefit. And we kind of roll the scores up and we prioritize them based upon the amount of funding we anticipate from those financial projections I showed you. So a summary of kind of where we're at, where we're going with the roadway ranking process. Again, in March, we had the committee look at the tier 1 scores, make sure that they're reasonable, and develop a score cutoff for tier 2. That's something that we did at our meeting earlier this week, and we're going to revisit it at our meeting next week. Tier 2 evaluation, again, this is the qualitative aspect of our ranking process. We're going to be covering that with the ranking committee in April. And then the fiscal constraint aspect, again, this is where we prioritize those highest scoring projects based upon the revenue we have available. We're going to be working on that in May, and that culminates with bringing this to the CRTPO board to open a public comment period in June. That will open on June 17th and close on July 14th. So that's really where we need to make the groups that you're aware of, this group, and if you're members of other civic and religious organizations, we want them to be aware that they need to review this project list to make sure that their priorities are included in that. So we're hoping to do a lot more public outreach presentations over the next several months to make residents aware this is really the time to be involved. Make sure that your important projects are included in this draft list. And then I'm just kind of close out with showing you all where our public engagement phases are. So the first phase of our public engagement began in November and it concluded at the end of December. Again, all virtual public engagement due to the pandemic, but we did have a very successful virtual kickoff meeting on December 17th. Dr. Mike helped us out with that. We really appreciate that. And now we're in the education and stakeholder outreach phase of the 2050 MTP update, speaking to groups like this. So certainly willing to do more of these presentations for other groups in this area. And then the third phase of public engagement will be to review that draft MTP project list in July and August. We'll be doing some ongoing outreach throughout the fall of 2021, and then we'll have our phase 4 of outreach when we have the draft report, and we're getting ready to adopt that in March of 2022. So again, throughout 2021, we're going to be very busy, and we're really hoping to reach residents throughout the planning area in a variety of different ways. So those were all the slides I have. I know that was a long-winded answer to Dr. Mike's question, so I'll turn it back to him.
Thank you, Neil. All right, that was great. And that just hopefully tells everybody the process that we have to go through to allocate these funds across our footprint. Next, I'm going to come back down the interstate with a specific question for each of our transportation professionals. And then we'll open up to some general questions to the region. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat box and I'll relay them to the panelists. So first, we have Ms. Weckerly. Tell us about the upcoming exit 38 interchange project, as well as your 2 flyover projects that are on the books.
Sure. So the exit 38 interchange project is a new interchange off of 77 at Cornelius Road. This project went through the prioritization process, and as you heard, I wasn't lying. It's a big process to learn, but the more you hear it, the easier it is. So it went through prioritization and was identified as a funded project. Unfortunately, it was what the construction year and the right-of-way year was pushed out. So it's not slated for construction right now in the state STIP until 2028. However, we, as a part of that project, we're working with NCDOT to realign Bluefield Road as a part of that project as well, since Bluefield is sort of acting as a frontage right there along the interstate. So exactly where that's going to be is still a question. So until that project starts getting into the design, we'll know more about that. But the benefit of the interchange, obviously, is that we know development will occur there closer to when that construction is slated to go in. And also the benefit is for it's a little further east, but up in that northern area of town is where we have our industrial park areas. And so it will provide another direct route for them to access 77 without going through the local streets of Mooresville. So we also, it's not mentioned on here, but I think it's good to talk about is we also went out and were awarded a CRTPO grant, which is it's a grant through the rail process to have a grade separation at Mazeppa Connector Road, which is where Cornelius extends towards the east. It's the extension of Cornelius towards the east to go over the rail. And that will also benefit not only our residents, but also that direct access for trucks without being impacted by the rail crossing there. So it would be an at-grade crossing that would be converted to go over the tracks. The other flyover projects that we have is Midnight Oats. That one's also not slated to have construction until 2029, but that one is, it runs parallel with Highway 150. And so I think these are just my thoughts, is that that because it was adjacent to 150 and that project is slated to be coming, it's the project that's coming sooner than all the rest of the state projects we have, that will improve that east-west travel in Mooresville. But the benefit of Midnight Oats is that local travel. And really that's what, one of the things that we're really trying to improve is areas where Midnight Oats was actually used to connect before 77 came through. So we're trying to put back those east-west connections. It won't have access to 77, but at least it will provide that local travel so that people who are trying to travel locally won't have to get on the interstate, travel for a short distance, and then get off, from exit to exit for 1 mile, and try to keep that traffic separated. So I think that that will really benefit really visitors and residents alike. So the final flyover project that we have is Fairview Flyover. We've had this, I think, for quite many years now, but it's actually slated for construction in 2025. And the Fairview Flyover project is a bridge over 77 that is just south of Williamson Road. And again, the benefit of this is local travel as well, being able to avoid people having to get on the interstate to go on either side from one side of Mooresville to the other across 77. And there will be several roundabouts as a part of that project. So that one will be fairly interesting to see how it functions when it's in. But the other point about the projects that is very important for us as well is that with the benefit with having these new projects is that we really also have a high, we put a high priority on the multimodal aspect. And so for each of those projects, they're exciting for us because they'll also provide that ability for bike, ped, and vehicle as a part of these roadway projects that we can connect to and have that ability for those users as well to cross 77 and access other areas. If you're on the west side, accessing the east side easier, and if you're on the east side, accessing the west side easier. So so we're excited for those projects, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, Andrew, you're next down the interstate. Tell us about initiatives in Davidson. I know bike and ped are very important because you included a whole slew of them in the CTP this last year. So tell us what's happening in Davidson.
In 2019, Davidson adopted a new mobility plan, which focuses on all modes of transportation.
We're having a lot of feedback. Try again. Okay.
Okay, is this better?
Not much. You were fine earlier. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, nothing has changed on my end. Does it help if I get closer to the screen?
A little bit. But anybody else here in that? Okay. Well, go ahead, Andrew. Just do the best you can.
I'm sorry about that. In 2019, Davidson adopted a new mobility plan, which focuses on all modes of transportation. During the development of the plan, we had over 300 people participate in the process, whether it be by charrette, email, walking tours, or other events. The overwhelming majority.
Mike, we may want to come back to Andrew. That's
very irritating.
maybe come back because that's
Yeah.
very
maybe Andrew, can you sign out and then sign back in?
Sure.
Thank you. All right, we'll drop down to Cornelius and Aaron. As those of us who are involved, we know we got a ton of projects hitting Cornelius all at the same time. And my statement is that every major artery, being a doctor, and Cornelius is going to be under construction. What are we doing to mitigate that negative impact on our businesses?
Sure, I can definitely talk about that. And that's something that COVID has given us a little bit more time to think about than we initially anticipated. One good thing that came out of some of the funding issues and some of the projects getting delayed is that while we have a lot going on here in Cornelius, a lot of projects, more than most jurisdictions, COVID and what's happened with the funding issues, that's allowed us to phase those out a little bit. So it's not quite as much impact at one time in one area. But certainly we have a lot coming in a short period of time still. And really what helps our businesses out is communication. The town has a communications director now, and she's definitely in the loop and knows what's going on with transportation. We've been working with town management to make sure we have all the right schedules and working with DOT to get all the correct information, especially when a project starts and there's actually work going on and the traffic is actually being impacted by construction. Getting that out to our businesses and letting them know exactly what's going on and when and where, that's important. And not only just our businesses, but our citizens that use our businesses and people coming into town, getting that word out there is also important. And we have a good game plan together to make sure that happens. I remember probably back when we were doing the Jeton Road project, that we were doing some repaving and some improvements out there. The town actually went door to door to businesses to make sure we even sent out newsletters and emails and did the best we could electronically. But I think going out door to door and actually talking to those business owners and making sure that it got out that, hey, we're doing some work here. Here's what's going on and here's what to expect. That really helps a lot. So that's a couple things we can do. And then on the regulation end, just here in the planning department, I know, and we had a little bit of practice with this with COVID, but some things that we can do on a regulation side is signage. I think directional signage is important. Things that drivers can see that they know that our businesses are open. So we are certainly looking at ways that we can address signage temporarily during construction projects to maybe give a little bit of relief in those areas so that drivers will know, hey, I can go here or this business is open. It really helps out, all those little things. And we've been doing that through COVID a little bit, and we've had a lot of good feedback from that. So those are just a couple of things that we're doing here in Cornelius to help mitigate with the issues of traffic being impacted by construction.
Thank you. And Mr. Hill, similar question. I was impressed. I heard your mayor give a talk about the number of locally funded projects but you also have your share of NCDOT projects coming. So any other ideas on how we can mitigate negative impact to impacted businesses?
Because of the fact that Huntersville has more than $250 million programmed over the next, I'd say, 5 to 10 years in construction starts, we have a local CIP. And what we're intending to do is we're trying to improve either intersections or create some new connectors, both on the east and the west side of town, so that there's less reliance on some of the state and federal facilities that are going to be basically disrupted. So I think that that's a fairly important distinction. And just as Aaron was talking about, we need to be thinking about things like local project directors or points of contact, so that if on any particular road you have a number to call, and if access is disturbed, or if there needs to be word given out that there's going to be a major development in the project in the coming days, at least there's no surprises. And in some of the communities I've worked for, whenever there's been a major disruption due to road construction, I've been involved in efforts to try to advertise or create some kind of an advertising program that just basically bolsters the notion of still open for business, and you can still get in there. You know, sometimes some of the businesses will create some incentives for people to want to shop during the construction. Those are some of the things that I've seen work reasonably effectively in trying to minimize the disruption that occurs when construction occurs. I think one notable facility that I wanted to bring to your attention is the Sam Fur Corridor, NC 73. I think it's a great example of, it is a major arterial simply because of geography. It's one of the only ways to get east-west throughout the state. I think it's going to become even more pronounced in terms of importance over the years. But one of the interesting facts about that is that you have multiple jurisdictions having some control over land use as you travel along the corridor. And this is going all the way from Lincolnton over into Concord in Cabarrus County. So one of the things that I think we're planning to do from a Huntersville standpoint is we have probably 3 small area plans that impact that corridor. One of them is multi-jurisdictional, that has some agreements with neighboring communities. And I think we need to pull that out and dust it off. And then one of the other issues that I see occurring is we have a strategy in terms of railroad crossings and which ones would stay open, which ones would close. And we had worked with the town of Cornelius on that. I think we need to go back and look at that, because all of our regional mobility, or not all of it, but a significant portion of it really depends on that NC 73 corridor. And so when I bring that up, I'm just trying to say that I think because of the amount of infrastructure investment that is occurring now, we're going to see a major change in what our communities look like because of these improved transportation facilities. So from a land use planning standpoint, I think a lot of us want to maintain a high quality community appearance. We want it to function properly, but we don't want to have the need to move vehicles be the only objective that we're trying to attain. So looking at maintaining the character and sense of place for some very high quality communities in North Mecklenburg is, I think, on everybody's mind. So I'll stop there.
And boy, is that a recurring theme of maintaining the quality of life, the essence of towns, and yet handling the extreme growth we've had. I hear that up and down the CRTPO footprint. And leads into my question is, this area is both lucky and challenged by our exploding growth for the last 3 decades. And thanks to the STI law, we are now obtaining more funding to address our lagging infrastructure. A common theme I hear is to think regionally to make the best use of limited dollars. This includes all aspects of transportation, not just vehicle. What are we doing to foster intra-municipality planning in area for the next 30 years? And has it been effective? Is there a long-term transportation vision for this area? And if not, how could one be created? I mean, I'm aware of the Lake Norman LNTC. We tried a little something called North Mech, but anyway, your staff's ideas on how we can foster intermunicipality cooperation and coordination. Anybody want to tackle that question? Andrew, let's see if your microphone still is working.
Is this better?
Oh, much better. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, I apologize. Those of you who know me know I'm not one to make unnecessary annoying noises, so I apologize for that. But what I would say, and I think we've started to do a good job of this, is staffs, particularly since I've been involved with CRTPO, we've made connections with the other staff members that surround us. So regionally, whenever any kind of project comes around, staff has been in communication with each other. And I'll make an example. Erika has sent us in Davidson an invitation next week because they're having some ordinance updates and they want some feedback from Davidson to see how that's going to impact Davidson. And with the transportation system, we've been doing the same thing. Iredell County is currently in the midst of making a comprehensive transportation plan, and they've included Davidson within their plan as well. So I just think communication between staffs and even elected bodies is really, it's kind of increased since I've been in the area. And I think that continues to increase as we communicate and I guess CRTPO is kind of the leader here because we all get together with these CRTPO meetings. And so I just think the communication between the municipalities is very big.
Anybody else want to tackle that question?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about an effort, particularly for North Carolina 73. We have the 73 Council of Planning that Cornelius is a part of, and there's a bunch of other jurisdictions, both in Lincoln County and all the way over in Cabarrus County, that meet several times a year to talk about that project. And it really goes way back. And really the main goal of that group initially was to help create a land use plan for the 73 area. And it's a massive land use plan. It goes from one end to the other. Now, Cornelius in particular, we have very little land that actually touches 73, but we're so close, and that is a crucial part of our transportation network that we are very much involved in that. But that's a good effort of all the jurisdictions working together to let everyone know what's going on, work on a land use plan years ago, work on what the design of 73 should be going forward. And then as of now, we look at development and how that impacts the proposed design of 73. So that's just one effort that we are currently doing right now to make sure we all stay connected.
Very good. Well, I have been given the hook, and this is the freight. I was afraid of that we'd run out of time before we ran out of conversation. And these are big topics. It's affecting all 4 municipalities in North Mech, and we have to coordinate with the whole region. So I thank my panelists for their time and their attention. And if there's interest, I'm sure we'll all welcome ourselves back if Jeff Tart asks us again. But Bill, I'm going to hand it off to you for final comments.
Yeah, Mike, I have one final question. Does the CRTPO in any way, shape, or form weigh in on Charlotte Move's proposal to increase our sales tax?
Hey, Bill, that's, go ahead, Dr. Mike.
Yeah, that's not, that has not come up in front of our policy board, and I don't think it probably will. It's not part of what we do.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, Andrew, you agree with that? I mean, Neil, you agree with that answer?
Yeah, so we've coordinated efforts, with Charlotte Moves in terms of the planning process, but not, our board, as Dr. Mike has stated, hasn't taken a position on any of the plan recommendations.
As you're probably aware, our Lake Norman Chamber, we are solidly for transportation improvements, always been historically for commuter rail, but the Chamber's board of directors unanimously came out in opposition to any increase in the sales tax for anything, whether that was transportation, education, healthcare, during this very bad economic time. I mean, people are having a hard enough time paying their bills. Businesses are still hanging on. Jennifer gave us some good news a little while ago, and hopefully the governor in a week or two is going to further release some of the restrictions on businesses. But right now, it is not a good time for business and not a good time to raise the sales tax.
And I'll say one thing, Bill, I think the region is looking more for light rail than traditional commuter rail. Regardless of the size of the engine or the cars, I think we want the frequency and the hours that light rail gives to, like, the Blue Line, and not just commuter rail, which would be just work hours.
Mike, I want to thank you and the panelists for being a part of today's program. As you just said, we had probably 2 hours, 3 hours worth of material trying to pack that into just an hour. But I want to thank everybody for participating. And again, I want to thank you and the panelists for being a part of today's program. Please have a great weekend, and thank you very much for everybody for participating. Have a great weekend at the lake.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.